Hey guys, how's everyone doing? This is Sir Jedi Sentinel, and welcome back to Sentinel Reviews. We are back looking at the penultimate episode of Doctor Who, Series 14/Season 1, and the first part of our two-part finale, The Legend of Ruby Sunday, written by Russell T Davies. As always, there is a blanket spoiler warning in place because I'm doing these unscripted, and I may decide to talk about spoilers. If you have not seen the episode in question, this is your one chance to jump ship, go watch the episode, and then come back and resume the video. And I honestly don't know what I make of this episode, because this is part one of a two-part finale. And I feel like whatever thoughts I have right now, they're gonna change, or they're gonna hinge on how part two, the episode is called The Empire of Death, is going to play out. But at the moment, right now, I kind of lean towards not liking this episode. Like, structurally and in terms of execution, this episode is just a mess. Also, I have personal issues with this episode, nothing critical or about the quality of the episode, just issues that pertain to me specifically, and I will talk about those towards the end. So what's the plot? The Doctor and Ruby arrive at Unit HQ telling the unit team about this mysterious woman they keep seeing in their adventures. She was in a resignation video in Space Babies. She was a kitchen worker in the Devil's Cord. This is Susan Twist I'm talking about. She was a hiker in 73 Yards. She was the ambulance in Boom. She was a portrait in Rogue, etc., etc. We even get a couple of instances of off-screen adventures. And the unit team reveals, yeah, we know about her. We've been keeping track of her based on your description. She's this tech mogul named Susan Triad. And the Doctor realizes S Triad is an anagram for TARDIS. We also meet two new members to the unit team. We meet Harriet, no last name given, who seems to be the overseer of the archives, I think was her description, and the new scientific advisor, a young boy named Morris, who seems to be replacing Ruth Madley's Shirley Ann Bingham. I don't know if it's just because Ruth Madley was busy or something, but yeah, that's the case. We have Morris, at least for this two-parter. We'll see how it plays out and goes on from there. Morris, and this is kind of one of the big issues we'll kind of talk about with this episode, just RTD has way too much going on. He's trying to juggle a lot, and not all of it's landing. Or he's putting too much time into one plot line, and because of that, the other plot lines seem to suffer. And, we kind of see that from just the size of this cast. We have the Doctor, Ruby, Kate, Mel, Carla. I'm trying to remember everyone. Colonel Ibrahim, Morris, Harriet. Rose Noble is here for some reason. I get that it's kind of been established now that Donna works for Unit. The dialogue kind of establishes that. But Rose is here, and really and she only seems to be here for fan service because the way the episode plays out, she doesn't contribute anything. And of course, we also have Susan Triad. And it's just this cast and the way they play out is too big. Like I just mentioned, Rose really serves no purpose here other than fan service. And similarly, the scientific advisor Morris serves no purpose here because a lot of what he's doing is just expositing what the audience already knows. He is basically the exposition dump character. And I actually saw this post on Twitter. He is essentially Sigourney Weaver's character in Galaxy Quest played straight. Remember, whenever the computer, if you remember Galaxy Quest, whenever the computer would give a status update or something, Sigourney Weaver would repeat it. And at one point, everyone kind of gets irritated at her for doing it. And she just goes, look, I have one job. It's stupid, but I'm gonna do it. Like I said, that's essentially what Morris is. He is that character played straight. And what else? And here, let's get to the other thing too. While they're investigating the various mysteries going on, because this is Russell T Davies, this episode is just Russell T Davies opening all of his mystery boxes. The Doctor believes, because of the anagram S Triad being TARDIS, he believes Susan Triad might be his granddaughter, Susan. And the Susan stuff feels so forced. I'll get into more of my... This also kind of ties into my personal issues, which we'll talk about towards the end of this video, hopefully. But, like, I never once thought for a second that this was actually Susan, and it feels like the episode itself is leaning toward... Well, obviously, the episode is leaning towards it not being actually Susan, but it's so blatant that the way this plotline plays out is just forced, combined with the fact that, once again, no time is given to it. You know, like, the cold open kind of sets up this plotline. We have one scene with Kate talking to the Doctor about his family, and then, you know, the rest of the episode plays out, and we don't get any resurgence of this plotline again until the end, when the Doctor actually meets Susan Triad. And then, again, while they're trying to look into what Susan Triad is doing, for fear it might be suspicious, the Doctor decides to stop this to once again trying to look into Ruby's past. And that's kind of the big thing. We have two big plot lines going on here. Susan Triad and what she seems to be doing, as well as once again looking into Ruby's past. And the two plot lines don't mesh well together. Like, it's obvious that they're going to be combined, but at the moment, it feels like the plot lines are more competing with each other than actually working together. This episode is not cohesive. Like, the entire time we get the Ruby plot line, it feels like the Susan stuff is entirely forgotten. It also feels weird that the way the Doctor arrives saying, this woman has shown up everywhere me and Ruby have been, and then saying, oh yeah, this is what she is, this is what she's doing, we're looking into it, and then going, okay, let's take care of Ruby now. It feels like the urgency that the way this plotline plays out, it's not being given. Like, the fact that they're just pressing pause on the Susan Triad stuff to look into Ruby's past once more. It feels like there's an urgency to the Susan Triad plotline. It feels like the Susan Triad plotline is not being given its due. But so anyway, we look into this device called the Time Window, kind of a primitive, limited, how would you describe it? It's not exactly time travel. They're just able to, like, look back on certain events in a 3D environment. It's really weird. Like, it also feels like the rules of the time window aren't clearly established, so that it can kind of do just what the plot needs it to do. That's another big issue with this episode. There's not a lot of logical sense to the things going on. It feels like things are playing out because the plot needs it to. Logic be damned. In fact, there's been a clip online going around about Russell T Davies. Basically, Russell T Davies in this interview clip basically said, oh yeah, I pretty much wrote this episode solely for the reactions on social media. And it shows. Like, the quality suffers because in a lot of ways this episode plays out. It feels like nothing but the twist matters. Nothing but the twist ending is gonna matter here. So in the time window, we get our first hint at what's going on. A mysterious entity suddenly manifests itself, and we don't know what's going on. We don't know if it's in the tape in 2004 or if it's manifesting now in the present. Carla suggests, because Carla's here, that it might be the Beast. I assume this is a nod to the Series 2 episode, The Impossible Planet in the Satan Pit. And it's trying to connect the Beast to what is ultimately going to be revealed, because they both have the same actor. If you've seen the episode, I know I'm kind of building up to the twist, but I do want to build up to it. And, I will say the time window stuff is really good. It is a decent part of the episode. And when we get the first hint of the entity, that is played so well. The tension is really good and everything. And had I not been spoiled for this online before watching it, I never would have guessed that this is the case, because The actor's voice, the actor in question is 91 years old now, and his voice is so different from when he first played this role. It's different, but it's still got a very great quality to it. He is the greatest voiced villain in Doctor Who. But anyway, so after the events of the time window, the Doctor decides now it's time to get the Susan Twist plotline back going. So he goes with Mel to the studio where Susan Twist is making her big speech. And really, the Susan Twist stuff should have been the entire episode, because after they interact and the Doctor doesn't recognize her, thus confirming it's not Susan Foreman, or Susan doesn't recognize the Doctor, excuse me, the Doctor sort of very quickly recounts how he saw her in all his adventures, and she registers that she knows what he's talking about because she's been having dreams about them. Hopefully this is something that will get explained in the next episode. The way this episode ends, probably not. So let's get into the ending here so I can talk about some of my other issues with this episode. As Susan is making her speech, the one who waits makes itself known. So we're getting some of our mystery boxes revealed here. We're getting Susan Twist explored a little more, not quite revealed. The big one we're getting is the one who waits. And it is Sutekh. From the Fourth Doctor story, The Pyramids of Mars. This is a good reveal. Murray Gold's score is great, and the way that, the episode plays out leading up to Sutekh's reveal is really good. I do also like Sutekh's update and redesign. It feels like an update on sort of his quote-unquote jackal form in the Pyramids of Mars, whereas that was a incredibly not great effect given Classic Who's budget, trying the best it is. It feels like an update of his jackal form, when Sutekh removes his helmet. I do hope we see the helmet in the next episode, The Empire of Death. But yeah, so obviously the lead up to this is that the Doctor is trapped with Mel with one of Sutekh's minions. Harriet, remember Unit's archivist, is Sutekh's harbinger, and Unit is trapped with Harriet and Sutekh in Unit HQ, and Ruby is trapped in the time window. And that's where the episode ends. Okay, so now some of my issues. And again, I want to reiterate that these are issues pertaining to me. When it comes to Doctor Who, if you haven't seen anything on my channel at all, I am an expanded universe nut. I love Doctor Who's expanded universe. Most of the time, I prefer it to the show, classic or new Who. And I don't want to be unreasonable about this. I get that we are a niche in the Doctor Who fandom. I understand that. And I understand that the show is usually not going to cater to us. Because the show has to cater to its entire audience. It's got to have a wide appeal. And as such, some things in the expanded universe are going to be changed or retconned. I understand all of that. But the way Russell T Davies made some of these changes or made some of these suggestions, it just really bugs me. And I don't know why. I feel like with New Who, some of the retcons in the past have made a logical amount of sense. They're ways to make this complicated bit of lore a little more accessible to new audiences. But it feels like a lot of the twists and a lot of the retcons that exist here exist for the sole reason of, because I'm Russell T Davies. Lately, it feels like a lot of the praise heaped on Russell T Davies is going to his head. And this episode is a perfect execution of that. Like I mentioned that interview where he said he pretty much only wrote this episode for the reactions on social media. It is kind of a good indicator of that. Especially given, again, how this episode kind of sets up. Nothing but the twist really matters here. So let's talk about some of my issues with that. First of all, Susan. I feel like the fact that, Susan Twist ultimately wasn't Susan, I feel like the way this episode has been playing it up, especially since the mention of Susan in The Devil's Cord, it feels like, Russell T Davies is hinting Susan is going to make an appearance. And if so, it's gotta be Carol Ann Ford. Like, unless she doesn't want to do it, or she isn't up to do it, or she isn't able to do it, it's gotta be Carol Ann Ford, especially now with the passing of William Russell, her being the last surviving member of the original TARDIS team. But also one of my little nitpicks because of the expanded universe lore, because this episode said Susan might have regenerated. Except we don't know that she was capable of that. There are some schools of thought, myself included, that Susan left with the First Doctor before she finished or entered the Time Lord Academy. Now, on Gallifrey, there are Gallifreyans and there are Time Lords. All Time Lords are Gallifreyans, but not all Gallifreyans are Time Lords. Basically, you have to graduate from the Time Lord Academy, and then you get your DNA rewritten to become a Time Lord, upon which you get the ability to regenerate. And if Susan is not a Time Lord, she does not have the ability to regenerate. So that's kind of my big thing with Susan, again, just as an EU nut, is that suggesting Susan can regenerate. There's also, based on the scene with Kate, there is also some, there is also the possibility that Russell T Davies may have just created a paradox. So one of the things I will criticize the Chibnall era for, as great as it is how Spyfall ended. The Master didn't just destroy Gallifrey, he wiped out all of the Time Lords in its entirety. Okay, destroying Gallifrey I can understand, but to go on and say, yeah, I've wiped out all of the Time Lords, that's a little bit overkill. But if he did that, and then we have this scene between Kate and the Doctor where he said Susan's parents haven't been born yet, well, if the Master wiped out all of the Time Lords, you've just created a massive paradox, Davies. Just by saying that. And let's talk about Sutekh himself a little bit more. First of all, I am so glad they got Gabriel Wolf back to voice him. That voice is just amazing. Gabriel Wolf voiced Sutekh in The Pyramids of Mars, as well as his Big Finish appearances. He also voiced the Beast in The Impossible Planet, The Satan Pit, which is in part where I think Carla calling Sutekh when he first appears, the Beast, is supposed to come. It feels like Davies is trying to make the Beast and Sutekh the same entity. But we get a lot of my big issues here are the lore surrounding Sutekh. One of the things I criticized Russell T Davies for in the past is kind of the way during the Tennant era he would hand wave away any explanation of gods. Like, they're not actually gods, they're aliens posing as gods, or some sort of creature posing as gods, because no one was allowed to be a higher position of authority than the Doctor. It's one of the things I've really liked about this time around so far, is that Davies is actually allowing the gods to be gods, something he never did before because the Doctor had to be God. Except that was the entire point with Sutekh. He is not actually a god, just his battle with the other Osirans kind of led to Earth, and the ancient Egyptians perceived them as gods. Also, just the fact that, the Pantheon is listed here. Like, we have the Toymaker, the god of games, the Trickster, the god of traps, the Maestro, the god of music, and then some other references, some classic Who references, like the Mara, the god of beasts. Except if you've seen Kinder or Snake Dance, that makes no sense. And then, we had the Trinity, I think it was, the gods of mischief and misery and malice, or something like. Presumably, that one is the gods of Ragnarok. Davies is trying to expand on this idea of the Pantheon, and it feels like listing Sutekh as the progenitor of the Pantheon. It also, not only does it, retcon Pyramids of Mars and that Sutekh is actually a god, it also feels like it is retconning Sutekh's race, the Osirans. Because, again, like, backstory wise, the Osirans are kind of why Pyramids of Mars happened. Horus defeated and imprisoned Sutekh. So if the Osirans and thus Horus doesn't exist, none of this could have ever happened in the first place. Again, this is me as an EU nut, understanding that sometimes the EU is rewritten or retconned, but just still being aggravated about it because of the leaps in logic Russell T Davies is making just for the sake of a twist. Did I have anything else? Oh yeah, Harriet Arbinger. This was a major sticking point for me because Russell T Davies is putting such a big focus on units, on the unit. He's giving us essentially a new unit family this time around. And, you know, there are rumors, I don't think it's been confirmed yet, has it, that a unit spin-off is in the works. And then he does something like this, something, I'm going to be honest, monumentally stupid. You know, because, like, when the Doctor arrives and everyone is, you know, recounting S Triad and how it's an anagram of TARDIS, everyone in the room says they caught on to that. But if everyone caught on to that, you're telling me no one, anywhere in unit, anywhere in the vetting process, caught on to H. Arbinger? No one? I'm just going to go into the wrap-up here. The Legend of Ruby Sunday is obviously going to hinge on how Part 2, The Empire of Death, plays out. But in and of itself, structurally, this thing is a mess. Like, plot lines are clashing with each other rather than cohesively working together. And again, it's just Russell T Davies is obviously building up to a twist to the point that by the time the twist happens, he's essentially saying none of the episode before that mattered. But those are just my thoughts on The Legend of Ruby Sunday. What are yours? Have you seen it yet? Start a conversation in the comments below. And remember to like, comment, subscribe. Click the bell next to subscribe to get notifications when I upload. Share the video around. All of it helps my channel grow. This is Sir Jedi Sentinel, and I'll see you guys next time.